The galaxy was a vast and mysterious place, filled with countless planets and civilizations. Some were ancient and powerful, while others were still finding their way in the stars. Among these countless worlds, one small planet, Alora, was struggling to survive. Alora was once a beautiful planet, home to the Zevran, an intelligent species known for their advanced technology and peaceful ways. The Zevran had lived for centuries in harmony with nature, but their world had been changing. For years, natural disasters had been tearing apart their ecosystem, causing food shortages and destroying entire cities. The Zevran's great cities, which were once symbols of their strength and wisdom, now lay in ruins. Desperate for help, the Zevran sent out a distress signal, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear their cry. Their message was clear. We are a dying people. Our world is falling apart. Help us before it is too late. The message traveled through the stars, reaching countless planets and alien civilizations. The Galactic Council, the governing body that ruled over many of the galaxy's most advanced species, was the first to receive the plea. The Council's representatives gathered to discuss the request, but they quickly dismissed it. One by one, representatives of various civilizations spoke up. Alora is too far from our territories, said the leader of the Cathorians, a species of reptilian beings. Their problems are their own, added the Verosians, a race of cold, calculating beings who valued logic over compassion. It would cost us too much to help them, declared the Clerians, a race known for their ruthless business dealings. Each race had their reasons for turning away. To them, Alora was just another weak civilization, one that had failed to adapt to the changing conditions of the universe. They had no desire to invest time, resources, or energy into saving a planet that seemed doomed. They saw the Zevran as a lost cause, and none of them were willing to lend a hand. As the council continued to debate, Captain Elias Carter of Earth sat silently in the back of the room. He had listened to every word spoken, and his heart had grown heavy with each passing moment. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. These advanced civilizations, with their vast knowledge and power, were willing to abandon an entire species just because they were facing difficult times. To Captain Carter, this was unacceptable. Humanity was different. Earth had always prided itself on helping others, on doing what was right, even when it was difficult. Humans had their flaws, but they had something many of these other civilizations lacked: empathy. Captain Carter knew that if humanity didn't step in, the Zevran would be lost forever. He stood up, his voice calm but firm. "We cannot just turn our backs on them," he said, his words cutting through the room like a sharp blade. "Alora may be far from Earth, but that does not mean we should ignore their cry for help. The Zevran are a peaceful people, and they deserve a chance to survive." His words were met with silence. The council members stared at him, some in surprise, others in disbelief. How could a human, a species still new to the galactic stage, be so bold as to challenge their decisions? But Captain Carter wasn't done. He continued, "We have the resources. We have the technology. We can help them, and I believe it is our duty to do so." The room fell into a tense silence. Some of the council members exchanged uneasy glances, while others shook their heads in disbelief. They had never seen a human speak with such conviction. It was clear that Captain Carter was not going to back down. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the leader of the council spoke. "Humanity is known for its idealism," the leader said, his voice cold and distant. "But you must understand that this is a matter of practicality. The Zevran are not worth our time. Their planet is doomed. No amount of aid can save them." Captain Carter didn't flinch. "Then let humanity save them," he said simply. "We will send a fleet, we will help them rebuild, and we will give them hope. And when the day comes that Alora rises again, it will be humanity that gave them that chance." The council was quiet. No one had expected this from Earth. No one had expected a species so young to be so determined. But despite their doubts, they couldn't ignore the sincerity in Captain Carter's words. The council members exchanged uncertain looks, and after a long pause, the leader spoke again. "Very well. If you are so determined, Captain Carter, we will not stop you. But understand this. You are on your own in this. You will face obstacles, and there will be those who try to sabotage your efforts. The galaxy will not help you." Captain Carter nodded, his resolve unshaken. "We don't need anyone else. Humanity will do this on our own." With that, the meeting ended, and Captain Carter returned to Earth, prepared to lead a mission that would change the course of history. Captain Elias Carter stood before a large window in the command center, staring at the stars beyond. His heart was heavy, but his mind was focused. The decision had been made. Humanity would help the Zevran, no matter the cost. But even as he gazed out into the vastness of space, he knew the path ahead would not be easy. Back on Earth, the response to the decision was a mixture of excitement and doubt. The government was ready to support the mission, but many people still wondered if it was worth the risk. Earth was a young species, still recovering from its own past struggles. It had only been a few hundred years since humans first ventured into space. They had made incredible progress, but they were still looked down upon by older civilizations in the galaxy. The idea of helping a dying species on a faraway planet seemed like a challenge they might not be ready for. But Captain Carter was resolute. He had seen the determination in the eyes of the Zevran when they had sent their distress signal. They weren't asking for charity. They were asking for a chance to survive, to rebuild their home. And Captain Carter couldn't turn his back on them. He would lead the mission, no matter what. The fleet was quickly assembled. It was a mix of human engineers, doctors, and scientists, each one volunteering to travel to Allura and help the Zevran in any way they could. The mission was called Operation Hope. The volunteers knew it would be dangerous, that they might never return, but their desire to make a difference was stronger than their fear. On the day of departure, the crew gathered on the massive transport ship, the Phoenix. It was one of Earth's most advanced ships, equipped with the latest technology. But even with all the tools at their disposal, Captain Carter knew that they were about to face challenges like none they had ever encountered. The Zevran's planet was unstable, their ecosystem on the brink of collapse. If they were to succeed, they would need to be resourceful, quick, and above all, united. As the fleet entered hyperspace, the crew gathered in the common room. The atmosphere was a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Dr. Amelia Quinn, the leading scientist in planetary engineering, stood before the group, her voice steady but full of determination. "We've been given a rare opportunity," she said, addressing the crew. "Allura's situation is dire, but it's not hopeless. We have the technology to fix their atmosphere, stabilize their core, and help them grow food again. But it's not going to be easy. The Zevran need us, and we can't afford to fail." The room was silent as the crew listened intently. Each person on that ship had their own reasons for volunteering, but they all shared the same goal: to save a species on the edge of extinction. Captain Carter stepped forward, his gaze meeting each person's eyes. "We might be alone in this, but we're not alone on this ship. We're a team. Every one of you has a role to play, and together, we'll make sure Allura survives. We'll do what no one else would do. We will give them hope." The crew nodded, their resolve solidifying. They were in this together. They had no choice but to succeed. As the Phoenix hurtled through the stars, the crew prepared for the challenges that awaited them. The journey would take several weeks, but there was no time to waste. Every day, new plans were drafted, new solutions to problems were explored. Dr. Quinn worked closely with engineers, trying to devise ways to stabilize the planet's rapidly deteriorating atmosphere. They knew that if they couldn't do that first, all their efforts would be in vain. Meanwhile, Captain Carter communicated regularly with Earth, ensuring that supplies were being sent and that the government's support was unwavering. It wasn't just about the resources. It was about proving that humanity could do what others thought impossible. The eyes of the galaxy were on them now, and they couldn't afford to fail. Days turned into weeks, and the fleet finally approached Allura. The planet loomed large on the screen, its once beautiful blue-green surface now covered in swirling storms and dark clouds. It was a sight that filled the crew with both dread and determination. They were about to enter a world on the brink of death, but they were also about to give it a chance to live. Captain Carter stood at the command console, his hands gripping the armrests as the ship prepared to land. "This is it," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "We're going to make a difference." The ship touched down on Allura's surface, and the crew moved quickly to disembark. They were met by a group of Zevran who had been waiting in the ruins of a city. The Zevran looked fragile, their skin pale from lack of sunlight, and their faces etched with worry. But when they saw the humans, something sparked in their eyes. Hope. Captain Carter stepped forward and addressed the Zevran leaders, his voice clear and firm. "We are here to help. We will save your planet. You are not alone anymore." The Zevran didn't speak at first. They simply stared at the humans, unsure of what to believe. But slowly, one by one, they nodded. There was a glimmer of hope in their eyes, but it was a fragile thing, like a flicker of light in a dark room. As the crew began their work, Captain Carter felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come this far, and they would not turn back. No matter the challenges, they would give Allura the future it deserved. As the human fleet settled onto the surface of Allura, the stark reality of the planet's condition hit Captain Elias Carter and his crew with full force. The once beautiful world now appeared as a shell of its former self. The skies, once filled with bright blue and white clouds, were now clouded with ash and swirling toxic storms. The wind howled as it carried the stench of decay and destruction across the landscape. The city that had once been the heart of the Zevran civilization lay in ruins, its towering structures now nothing more than rubble. Roads were cracked and broken, and in the distance, charred trees stood like silent sentinels, their lifeless branches reaching up to the storm-filled sky. It was hard to imagine that this world had once been so full of life and promise. The human crew, clad in protective suits, stepped carefully onto the cracked earth, their eyes scanning the desolate landscape. Every step they took seemed to echo in the silence, a reminder of how far the Zevran had fallen. Captain Carter led the team forward, his heart heavy. He had known that Allura's condition was bad, but seeing it up close was another matter entirely. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. A group of Zevran emerged from the shadows of the ruins, their eyes filled with uncertainty. The Zevran were tall and slender, their skin a pale shade of blue with subtle patterns that shimmered faintly under the dim light. Their faces were drawn with exhaustion, and their eyes, once filled with curiosity and intelligence, now held only the shadows of hopelessness. The leader of the group stepped forward, her movements slow, as if every step caused her pain. Captain Carter bowed his head slightly in respect. "We're here to help," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We've come to save your world." The Zevran leader studied him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. Then, with a deep sigh, she spoke. You are humans." Her voice was soft but tinged with disbelief. "I thought we had no more hope." "We are here now," Captain Carter replied, his voice filled with resolve. "And we won't leave until your planet is healed." The Zevran leader's expression softened slightly, but there was still a deep sadness in her eyes. "The damage is too great," she whispered. "Allura is dying. There is nothing anyone can do." "We won't give up," Captain Carter said firmly. "We've faced tough challenges before, and we'll face this one too. You have not been abandoned. You are not alone." The leader of the Zevran looked down at the ground. Her shoulders slumped in exhaustion. It was clear that the weight of her people's fate was too much for her to bear, but she did not protest further. Instead, she turned and gestured for the humans to follow her. As they walked through the ruins, Captain Carter and his team noticed the signs of the Zevran struggle. They had built underground shelters to protect themselves from the storms, but there was little food or clean water. Many of the shelters were overcrowded, and the air was thick with tension. The few Zevran who still had the strength to work tried their best to repair what they could, but it was clear that their efforts were not enough. Without help, they would soon be forced to abandon their planet completely. At one of the largest shelters, the Zevran leader paused. She turned to Captain Carter, her face etched with pain. "This is all we have left," she said quietly. "Our world is dying, and we cannot stop it. The storms grow worse each day. The ground trembles beneath our feet. If nothing is done soon, we will all perish." Captain Carter placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "We'll stop it," he said. "We have the technology to stabilize the planet's atmosphere and its core. We have the knowledge to rebuild. We won't leave until we've made sure Allura has a future." The Zevran leader's eyes flickered with a faint glimmer of hope, but it was clear that years of despair had taken their toll. She nodded, but her voice was still filled with doubt. "You are brave to believe so, but we have watched as other civilizations turned their backs on us. They said we were too weak to survive. Perhaps you, too, will realize that saving us is impossible." Captain Carter shook his head. "Humanity has always believed in second chances. We know that no one is beyond saving, and we won't let Allura be another lost world." The human team set to work immediately. They began to assess the damage to the planet's atmosphere, using their advanced technology to measure the toxins in the air and the instability in the planet's core. They discovered that the core had begun to shift, causing unpredictable earthquakes and volcanic activity. It was clear that they would need to stabilize the core before they could even begin to repair the planet's surface. Dr. Amelia Quinn, the lead scientist on the mission, worked closely with the engineers, drawing up plans to launch a series of deep space drills to reach the planet's core and inject stabilizing compounds. Meanwhile, other members of the team focused on purifying the air and restoring clean water supplies. It was a monumental task, and every day brought new challenges. But despite the immense difficulties, the crew pressed on. They had come here to save Allura, and they would not rest until they succeeded. Slowly but surely, the Zevran began to trust them. They joined in the efforts, helping where they could, offering their knowledge of the planet's conditions. And little by little, the faint glimmer of hope that had appeared in their eyes began to grow stronger. Captain Carter knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, but as he looked at the faces of the Zevran, he couldn't help but feel that they had made the right choice. No one else had been willing to help, but humanity had. And that, he believed, was something worth fighting for. The days on Allura blurred together as Captain Elias Carter and his crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the planet. Each challenge they faced seemed harder than the last, but they never gave up. They had made a promise to the Zevran, and they would see it through. Allura was their responsibility now, and every member of the human team knew it. Dr. Amelia Quinn and her engineering team had designed a plan to stabilize Allura's shifting core. The deep space drills, once deployed, would reach the planet's heart and inject a series of compounds meant to slow the core's movement. It was a delicate operation, one that had never been attempted before, but they had no choice. The planet's earthquakes were growing more frequent, and every tremor threatened to destroy what little the Zevran had left. On the ground, the human doctors and medics worked with the Zevran, tending to the sick and injured. Many of the Zevran had been weakened by years of exposure to the toxic atmosphere and constant storms. Captain Carter had made it a priority to ensure that the Zevran were given medical care, even though resources were limited. Every life mattered, and the humans had sworn to save them all. Despite the progress they were making, Captain Carter couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Every day that passed brought more damage to the planet's surface. The storms, once unpredictable, had now become a constant presence. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air grew thicker with each passing hour. It was a race against time, and the humans were determined not to lose. One morning, Captain Carter stood outside the main shelter, gazing at the storm clouds overhead. The winds howled, and the sky was a dark shade of green, as if the very atmosphere itself was on the brink of collapse. The Zevran leader, who had begun to trust the humans, joined him in silence. She, too, looked up at the storm, her face drawn with concern. "We're making progress," Captain Carter said, his voice steady. "The deep space drills are on their way. If everything goes as planned, we should be able to stabilize the core in a few days." The Zevran leader nodded slowly, but there was a look of doubt in her eyes. "And if they don't work?" she asked softly. "We'll make them work," Captain Carter replied firmly. "We have to." The leader looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. "You believe we can survive. But do you truly believe Allura can heal?" Captain Carter met her gaze. "I believe it can, and I believe we can help it heal. We've already saved parts of your world. The air is cleaner, the water is running again. The first step is the hardest, but it's the most important. If we stabilize the core, the rest of the work will follow." The leader said nothing, but Captain Carter could see that she was torn between hope and doubt. It was understandable. After so many years of watching their world die, it was hard for the Zevran to believe that help had truly arrived. But as the days passed, the humans continued their work. The storm clouds began to clear, and the air felt a little less oppressive. The work on stabilizing the core was moving forward, step by step. A week later, the deep space drills finally arrived. The team worked around the clock, preparing the equipment and making final adjustments. The stakes were high. If they failed, the consequences would be disastrous. But Captain Carter had no doubt. They had come this far, and they would succeed. As the team lowered the drills into place, the Zevran gathered around, watching in awe. For the first time in years, they saw something they hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. It was a fragile thing, like a spark in the dark, but it was there. Captain Carter stood at the front of the group, his eyes never leaving the drills. "This is it," he said, his voice quiet but filled with resolve. "We've done the hard work. Now we wait." Hours passed in tense silence. The hum of the machines was the only sound, but everyone's attention was fixed on the drills. The Zevran watched, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and anticipation. The humans knew this was the moment that would determine the fate of Allura. And then, finally, the monitors began to show signs of success. The drills had hit the core, and the stabilizing compounds were being injected into the planet's heart. Slowly, but surely, the planet's shaking began to subside. The tremors, once constant and violent, were growing weaker with every passing minute. The humans and the Zevran exchanged looks of disbelief. It was working. The planet was responding. For the first time in what felt like forever, the storm clouds above them began to part. The dark green sky slowly began to lighten, and a soft, warm light broke through the clouds. The air, once thick with toxic fumes, began to feel fresher, lighter. Captain Carter let out a sigh of relief. He knew there was still much work to be done. But this was a victory. It was proof that they could save Allura. They weren't just repairing the planet. They were giving the Zevran a future. The Zevran leader stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "You did it," she said, her voice trembling. "You saved us." Captain Carter smiled, though there was a sense of exhaustion in his eyes. "We're just getting started," he said. "But we'll do everything we can to make sure you have a chance to rebuild. You and your people deserve that." The Zevran leader nodded, a faint but real smile forming on her lips. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that Allura might survive. And in that moment, the future of her world felt just a little bit brighter. The progress on Allura was slow, but the change was undeniable. With the core stabilizing, the planet's tremors had almost stopped. The storm clouds were no longer a constant threat, and for the first time in years, the Zevran began to see clear skies. The air was cleaner, and the water had returned to its natural, life-giving flow. Small victories like these gave hope to a planet that had almost given up. Captain Elias Carter and his crew worked day and night, pushing forward with their efforts to repair the planet. The stabilizing process was only the beginning. Next, they turned their attention to the atmosphere, which still carried traces of toxins and chemicals. Dr. Amelia Quinn, the lead scientist, had come up with a plan to introduce a mixture of plant life and algae into the atmosphere to help filter out the harmful elements. The Zevran, once hesitant, now watched with curiosity and awe. They had never imagined that their world could be saved, but the humans had proven them wrong. It wasn't just the technology they brought with them. It was their belief that no planet, no people were beyond saving. Captain Carter's team had shown them that hope could rebuild a dying world. As the weeks passed, Captain Carter began to see the first signs of recovery. The fields, once barren, were now starting to show signs of life. Small plants began to sprout, and the air smelled fresher with each passing day. The Zevran, who had once wandered aimlessly in despair, now began to work alongside the humans. They helped plant new crops, restore their cities, and rebuild their homes. One evening, Captain Carter stood on the edge of a hill overlooking a valley. The setting sun cast a warm orange glow over the landscape. It was a sight he had never thought he would see on Allura. Below him, the Zevran were planting rows of crops, their faces filled with determination and purpose. The Zevran leader, who had once been a symbol of despair, now walked beside him. She had a new strength in her step, her posture straighter, and her eyes filled with a spark of hope. She paused beside Captain Carter and looked out over the valley. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked quietly. Captain Carter didn't answer immediately. He watched as the Zevran worked together, their unity stronger than he had ever seen it before. "I think it's a good start," he said at last. "Allura has a long way to go, but you're on the right path." The leader nodded slowly. "You've given us more than just a chance to survive," she said. "You've given us a chance to rebuild our world, to rebuild ourselves." Captain Carter smiled. "It's not just us. You and your people are the ones who will carry this forward. You've got the strength to make Allura great again. We're just here to help." The leader's eyes softened. "I didn't believe that anyone would come to our aid. So many turned their backs on us. But you saw us. You believed in us." Captain Carter looked at the people below, working tirelessly. He knew they had only just begun, but something inside him told him that Allura was going to be okay. The Zevran had fought for so long to survive, and now they were ready to fight for their future. Meanwhile, back at the main shelter, Dr. Quinn and her team continued their work on the planet's atmosphere. The introduction of new plant life had started to show results, but it would take months to fully restore the air. The Zevran were eager to help, and they worked with the humans to cultivate new crops, focusing on plants that could survive in Allura's environment. The once barren fields were now dotted with vibrant green, and the air felt fresher with each passing day. It was clear that Allura was healing, but the process was slow. There were still dangers to face, unpredictable storms, occasional tremors, and a long road ahead to fully restore the planet's ecosystems. But there was no longer the same feeling of hopelessness that had once hung over the world. The Zevran had found a new purpose in life, and the humans had given them the tools to make their planet whole again. One morning, as Captain Carter was overseeing the construction of a new shelter, a young Zevran girl approached him. She was small for her age, with bright blue skin and wide, curious eyes. She had seen the humans working on the planet for weeks, and her face lit up when she saw the captain. "Are you really going to save our planet?" she asked, her voice innocent but filled with hope. Captain Carter knelt down to her level, offering her a warm smile. "We're doing our best," he said, "but it's not just me. It's all of us working together. Your people, the humans, everyone." The girl nodded, her eyes filled with wonder. "I'm going to help too," she said with a serious expression. "I'm going to plant trees like the humans do." Captain Carter chuckled softly. "That's the spirit. We need all the help we can get." The girl beamed. "We'll make Allura beautiful again. I know we will." As the girl ran off to join the other Zevran, Captain Carter stood up, looking out over the valley once more. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but with the people of Allura by his side and the strength of humanity supporting them, he was confident they would succeed. The planet was healing. And in time, Allura would rise from the ashes, stronger than ever before. As the months passed, the humans and Zevran worked tirelessly together to restore Allura. The planet's core had been stabilized, the storms had weakened, and the air was now breathable. Despite all the progress, the recovery was far from complete. There were still challenges ahead, and the people of Allura knew it. Captain Elias Carter stood at the top of a hill, watching the horizon. The skies were clear now, but in the distance, dark clouds were beginning to form. He knew it was only a matter of time before the storms would return. The planet's atmosphere, though improving, was still fragile, and the tremors, though less frequent, still had the potential to cause great damage. They had stabilized the core, but Allura was not yet fully healed. Dr. Amelia Quinn, the lead scientist, had made a breakthrough in their atmospheric project. The new plant life they had introduced was growing at an impressive rate. The algae in the oceans were purifying the water, and the crops on the land were thriving. Still, they needed more time to fully restore the balance. The task ahead was enormous, and they had no way of knowing how long it would take to reach full recovery. "Captain, we've got a problem," said Lieutenant Avatoris, approaching with a concerned look on her face. Captain Carter turned to face her. "What's the situation?" "We've detected a new seismic event. It's not huge, but it's coming from the northern region. It could be another tremor or something worse," she said, pointing to a small map on her tablet. "We think it's related to the geothermal instability around the northern plate." Carter's brow furrowed. "How bad is it?" "The scans are still coming in, but if the tremor is as strong as we suspect, it could trigger another volcanic eruption. And if that happens, the entire northern region could be impacted. We don't have the resources to handle another disaster like that." Captain Carter nodded grimly. "We'll need to move quickly. Alert Dr. Quinn and get the engineers ready. I want to be sure we have a plan in place before anything happens." As the team scrambled to assess the situation, Captain Carter couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility. He had promised the Zevran that he would help them rebuild their world. They had come so far, but there were still so many hurdles left to overcome. The planet wasn't out of danger yet, and the humans had to do everything they could to protect Allura from whatever came next. The Zevran, seeing the humans work so tirelessly to help them, had grown stronger in their resolve. They had learned how to adapt to the changing environment and had begun to take on more of the rebuilding tasks. Many of them worked alongside the human engineers, planting more crops, restoring old structures, and even helping to build new ones. The humans had given them hope, and now it was the Zevran who were giving their all to ensure their planet's survival. Meanwhile, the Zevran leader had begun to focus on the political stability of her people. The long years of struggle and uncertainty had caused divisions among her people. Many of the tribes had lost their sense of unity, and some still held on to old grudges. But as the planet began to recover, she saw an opportunity to bring her people together. She spoke with the elders, urging them to set aside their differences for the good of their world. Captain Carter watched as the leader spoke to her people. He had seen the transformation in her, from a weary leader on the brink of despair to someone who exuded hope and determination. She was no longer just a leader. She was a symbol of what could be accomplished when people worked together. "We've come a long way," she said, addressing her people. "But the journey is far from over. We must continue to work together, not just as tribes, but as one people. The humans have shown us that nothing is impossible. We will rebuild Allura, and we will do it together." Her words resonated deeply with the Zevran. The once fractured tribes began to come together, helping each other and working side by side with the humans. The rebuilding efforts gained new momentum as more Zevran joined in. The unity that had been lacking for so long was finally taking shape. Despite the progress, Captain Carter knew that the greatest challenge was yet to come. They needed to prevent the volcanic eruption in the north, or else all their work would be undone. Dr. Quinn and her team had come up with a solution, a series of seismic dampeners that could help stabilize the northern plate. But the installation of these devices would be dangerous. The team would have to work in a region where tremors were frequent, and the volcanic activity was unpredictable. Captain Carter gathered his team, along with a group of the bravest Zevran, and set out for the northern region. The journey was long and treacherous. As they approached the danger zone, the ground beneath them trembled. The air grew heavy with tension. They had no way of knowing whether the seismic dampeners would work, but they had no choice. If they didn't act now, the northern region would be lost. The team worked quickly, drilling into the ground and installing the dampeners. The tremors grew stronger with each passing minute, but the humans and Zevran remained focused. The devices were finally in place, but the real test would be if they could hold off the volcanic eruption. As the team made their way back to safety, Captain Carter could only hope that their efforts would be enough. The future of Allura depended on it. The weeks following the installation of the seismic dampeners were tense. Every tremor sent a wave of fear through the team. But day by day, they saw that the devices were working. The northern region, once on the brink of destruction, began to stabilize. Captain Carter and his crew, along with the Zevran, breathed a sigh of relief. The Zevran leader, now more confident than ever, had organized a gathering in the central city to celebrate the recovery. It wasn't just a celebration of the planet's healing, but of the unity that had been forged between her people and the humans. It had been a long, hard journey, but they were standing at the threshold of a new beginning. Captain Carter stood at the front of the crowd, looking out over the vast gathering. The Zevran had built a new city on the foundations of their old one, and it was a sight to behold. The buildings were made of natural materials, designed to blend with the environment, and the streets were lined with green plants that would help maintain the planet's health. There was a sense of harmony in the air, something that had been absent for so long. The Zevran leader stepped forward to speak. Today, we stand not as individuals or as tribes, but as one people. We've been through darkness and hardship, but now we are beginning to see the light. The humans have shown us the power of unity, and together we will build a world that our children can inherit with pride. The crowd cheered, and Captain Carter felt a surge of pride. The work wasn't over, but the hardest part was behind them. The foundation of a new Allura had been laid, and the Zevran were ready to take the lead. Humanity had given them the tools, but it was their strength and determination that had made this success possible. As the celebration continued, Captain Carter caught a glimpse of Dr. Quinn standing near the edge of the crowd. She was talking to a group of young Zevran scientists, explaining some of the new methods they had used to restore the planet's atmosphere. The humans had not only provided physical aid, but also knowledge and guidance. The Zevran were eager to learn, and Dr. Quinn had become a mentor to many of them. The future of Allura was no longer uncertain. The planet had been given a second chance, and the Zevran were determined to make the most of it. They had learned to adapt to their environment, to work with the land rather than fight against it. They had learned that unity, not division, was the key to survival. As the sun set on another peaceful day, Captain Carter stood by the leader of the Zevran. The planet was healing, and the future looked brighter than it ever had before. They had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, but they had overcome them together. And now they were ready to build a new world, a world where the Zevran and humans could thrive side by side. "Do you think they'll be okay?" the Zevran leader asked quietly, her gaze on the horizon. Captain Carter smiled. "I believe in them. They've got the strength to make it, and they've got the heart to keep going." The leader nodded. "We couldn't have done this without you, without the humans." "You did the hard part," Captain Carter replied. "You never gave up, even when it seemed like all was lost. You're the real heroes here." The Zevran leader smiled, a genuine smile that reflected the hope and pride that had grown within her. "We're just starting, Elias. Together, we'll make Allura a place where no one ever has to give up again." As the crowd gathered around the central square, Captain Carter felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had come to Allura not knowing what to expect, but now he understood. The planet had been on the brink of destruction, but now, thanks to the determination of its people and the help of the humans, it was reborn. The last challenge had been met, and the future was bright. The people of Allura had not only been saved, but they had learned to rebuild in a way that would last for generations to come. Captain Carter knew that their journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt confident that they were on the right path. As he looked around at the people celebrating their success, he couldn't help but think of all the other planets in the galaxy that still faced dangers of their own. Would they be as lucky as Allura? Would they find a way to survive? He knew that humanity would continue to help, to reach out a hand to those who needed it, and with the strength of the Zevran and other civilizations they might encounter, humanity would show the galaxy that no world, no people was beyond saving. Allura was just the beginning.